Alright, you guys, welcome to the Arrow After Show, where today we're talking about Season 3, Episode 12, entitled Uprising. We're going to talk Arrow. Let's talk about this week's episode, which was basically the conclusion to the Brick story arc, to Laurel becoming the Black Canary story arc. And, wow. This episode was epic. It was awesome. I absolutely love this episode. Let's talk about this shit. First off, the positives, as you guys know, I go through the positives and the negatives of each week's episode, in my opinion. First positive on here, Sin is back. Sin, I have been waiting so long to find out what Sin has been up to. Because to me, Sin is one of my all-time favorite characters on the show, and we haven't seen her at all this season. So, but Stephen Amell stated it was around episode 6 of Season 3. Stephen Amell stated, because somebody asked, well, where the hell is Sin? And Stephen Amell goes, well, she's around. She'll be back at some point. But she's back, and I missed the character of Sin so much, so that was a big positive for me. This episode, we didn't get any Hong Kong flashbacks or anything like that of Oliver and Maseo and Tatsu and all of them, and China White and all of them in Hong Kong. This episode focused on Malcolm Merlyn, who, again, is one of my favorite characters on the show, and the flashbacks were showing the events revolving around his wife's death in the Glades, when Tommy was a boy, and Malcolm Merlyn kind of deciding that he wants vengeance. And so that's what the flashbacks were basically surrounding today. And of course, those flashbacks were great, seeing what a good family man Malcolm Merlyn once was, because ever since the show started, we had conversations about how Malcolm Merlyn used to be a good family man, but we actually got to see it this time, and that was cool. I like seeing young Tommy. He was just so damn adorable. I mean, come on. And there's a scene where it's the funeral of Malcolm's wife, and you see young Tommy and young Oliver standing next to each other, and Ollie says something along the lines about, I'm sorry your mom died, and that was just cute. It was awesome. And of course the flashbacks of Malcolm Merlyn trying to find the guy who killed his wife, and of course eventually going to the League of Assassins to train under Ra's al Ghul. That was all cool. And then we find out that Malcolm Merlyn believes he killed the guy who killed his wife back in the day. We find out he didn't. We find out that Brick was the one who killed his wife. But what's even more interesting about that whole reveal is that Malcolm Merlyn found out the minute the Arrow team found out, because he had a camera in the Arrow cave. Now, you're probably thinking, how is this possible? I was thinking, when you remember when Malcolm Merlyn was in the Arrow cave, what was it, like last week or the it might have been the week before, when he was in the Arrow cave telling him that Oliver Queen is dead. My guess says he planted the camera right there, kind of the same way that Slade planted the cameras all around the Queen Mansion in Season 2. But that was because, you know, Brick killing Malcolm's wife, I didn't expect that, but it was even more interesting to me that Malcolm was watching the whole time, so that was cool. Lance immediately knows who Arsenal is, which is funny because there's a nod to The Flash right there, where he's like, I've heard about you. You're the guy in the red costume. So you're the guy in the red costume I've been hearing about on TV. He's like, Arsenal goes, that's the wrong city. So that was a cool little Flash nod. And this is my pauses because Lance knows who Arsenal is right away. It's not that hard to figure out. But yet, for some reason, he can't figure out that Oliver Queen is the Arrow, and he can't figure out that Black Canary is not Sarah anymore, it's Laurel. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. So there's a moment where Laurel is in the Arrow cave, and Felicity's explaining a bunch of shit, and Laurel just looks at her and he goes, I don't understand a word you just said. That was a cool little line, because Laurel hadn't really had that many jokes, I guess you could say, especially in this season. She hasn't been really in a joking mood, but that one line, I don't know, it made me laugh. And then Malcolm trying to join Team Arrow, getting Team Arrow to join with Malcolm to take down Brick. I'm pretty sure Malcolm can handle Brick on his own, but the fact that, because we all want to see Arrow and Merlin team up, and we know it's going to happen at the probably at the season finale. But to get it for this, I don't know. I just like the whole idea of Malcolm trying to team up with Team Arrow. And then Roy, he is kind of putting his foot down. He's trying to be a leader because in Oliver's absence, somebody has to step up. And you could argue that maybe Diggle or Felicity should be the ones stepping up. Felicity has been standing up for herself. She's like, look, I really don't want to have that much of a part of this anymore. Diggle, you could argue the fact that he's trying not to get into the field too much these days because he does have a family to protect. But to see Roy kind of take that authority, to take that charge, I thought was a great step for him. I've grown to the Roy character a lot. I've mentioned that a lot on this after show. But yeah, I've grown to Roy this season, and it's good to see him step up as more of a leader type of guy. In Oliver's absence, of course. And then recruiting the city, because that's what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it recruiting the city, because they basically try to get almost everybody in the city to fight, at least everybody in the Glades, fight against Brick and his goons. And Sin is among these people, and Ted Grant, who we haven't seen since, I believe, episode 6. I think that was the last time we saw him. I don't remember for sure. We might have seen him before, and I probably talked about it. But that was cool. I like them trying to recruit everybody. It was great to see Sin back in there. I don't really like Ted Grant all that much, so I didn't care about him. I was just happy that Sin was back, but that whole scene of them trying to recruit the city was pretty cool. And when Sin sees Arsenal, she knows it's Roy, and I missed it. This is the thing that I have missed probably the most about Sin. I don't know. I really like the character of Sin. But she sees Arsenal and she goes, Abercrombie. I'm like, yes. She's still calling him Abercrombie. You guys don't know how much I've missed Sin and how much I've missed her calling Roy that. So yeah. And then Roy, once again, he's stepping up to be a leader. And when that final fight's about to go down, he goes, you have failed this city. Something that Oliver hasn't said in a long time. But Roy is finally at that point where, I even posted a tweet about this. If you guys don't know, I live tweet Arrow each week. Or at least most weeks I try to. There might have been a week or two I might have missed. I don't think I've missed any this season. But anyway, I made a tweet saying, Arsenal is now in full, you have failed this city mode. Brick, you need to watch your ass. Or something like that. But, yeah. Roy, he's stepping up as a leader. And then I'm going to call this Team Brick versus Team Starling. And Team Starling is basically everybody in the Glades and Team Arrow teaming up against Brick and his goons. So I'm calling that the fight between Team Brick and Team Starling. That fight was epic. It could have went out a little bit longer. Not gonna lie, I kind of wanted to see more of it, but it's all right because in the nick of time, Oliver, who I haven't really talked about in this episode, we've seen Oliver. He's going home, and throughout the episode, we see him getting closer and closer, and he's talking to Tatsu. And, there really wasn't too much happening there, except the fact that Oliver was just trying to get home. But in the nick of time, Oliver shows back up in Starling City in the full Green Arrow outfit. He hooded up. That's right. I might do the rest of the after show like this. He hooded up, and, yeah. And then he gives this great speech. But before we get to that, I forgot about something here. Oliver returns. And then he finds Malcolm Merlin. He's going to kill Brick. And, Oliver's trying to talk him out of it. It's a very love-hate situation with Malcolm and Oliver. And so that was cool. And then when Oliver stands up in front of everybody and he says, I have returned and you have not failed this city and I promise I won't leave you again. That whole speech gave me chills, and it was intense. Stephen Amell pulled it off, and yeah, he gave me. I'm gonna keep the hood up out of respect for Oliver Queen. Um, yeah, that whole speech, I was geeking out. I absolutely loved it, the way it was delivered and everything. And then at the end of the episode, Lance is talking to Sin, and she goes, "Oh yeah, you're a friend of Sarah. Did you see? She's back now." And Sin just looks at Lance and goes, "That's not Sarah." I'm like, yes! Somebody finally told him that Sarah is not Black Canary anymore. Um, now, he still doesn't know that Sarah's dead. But Sin, I will admit, Sin being the one to tell him probably was not the right person, but I loved it. It's Sin. Lance finally knows. I was happy about that. Well, he knows part of it anyway. He doesn't know that Sarah's dead. All he knows is that the Black Canary is not Sarah. So that's all my positives. So let's get into the negatives now. I'm going to take my hood off now. Negatives, I only have a couple things. Laurel in this episode has become a slightly better fighter than she was in the last episode. This is a negative, because I don't think you're going to be... Laurel's going to be a badass at some point, and I'm sure at some point I will come around to her being the Black Canary. I don't like the idea still. But in this episode, she's gotten a little bit better as a fighter than she was in last week's episode. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this episode was only like a day or two later after last week's episode. Because didn't in last week's episode, he said that they had like... Brick said that they had like 24 hours to evacuate the Glades. And then... So this would only be like a day or two later, if I'm not mistaken. And Laurel just learned how to fight just slightly better. She's not a badass yet, at least in my opinion. But she became a slightly better fighter in like a day, and like that. Another thing is, not enough Lance, not enough Detective Lance. I love Paul Blackthorne as Detective Lance, and we haven't seen too much of him this season. He's been around, but like he's been popping up in each episode, but he hasn't had too much to do. He hasn't been too involved. And you could argue, well, he has a health condition and all that. But I want to see as much Lance as possible. I like the character of Lance. And then, like I said, Oliver came back. And then Felicity, because Oliver's talking about how he wanted to team up with Merlin. He needed as many people as they could get to take down Brick. Felicity's just like, look, no, we told him no because this is what we thought you would have wanted. And you died. The last thing you told me before you left was that you loved me. And she's kind of got this whole, like, I don't want to talk to you right now attitude. I'm like, he just got back. You thought he was dead for a month. And you even told him that, like, look, I thought you were dead for a month. And you're pissed off. I get it. But I would think the first thing you would want to do when he gets back is at least hug him and talk about how much you've missed him. And because the fight was over, so you had time to do that. Just be happy that he's back for a minute, and then get mad at him maybe like an hour or two later. So I didn't like that she got mad so quickly. Like, she could have had a nice reunion with him first, before she had to have that attitude. But that's just me. So guys, what'd you think of Season 3, Episode 12, entitled Uprising? What are your predictions for next week's episode, which I'm pretty excited about? It's going to be Sarah versus Laurel. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the promo for next week's episode. It'll explain to you a lot. Also, I'm going to plug myself here. Go like my Arrow fan page on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/ArrowFanCity. Go give it a like. Share it with your friends who are Arrow fans. If you want to become an admin, let me know. Also, I live tweet during each week's episode of Arrow, so you can find me on Twitter at CSnyder106. That's CSNYDER106. On Twitter, you can find me there. And we're going to end this like I always do now. So, yeah, Season 3, Episode 12, Uprising. You have failed this city.